Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and we're getting close to the end of our first full day. Blake, you were to be the closing keynote today, but we had to make room for some additional speakers, so we actually have 2 sessions after yours, concurrent sessions. But it really is a delight to have you here, and thanks for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure, Steve.
Thanks to Homeschool Life, G3, and Home Education Magazine for support and promotion of the conference. Thanks to Blackboard Collaborate for being a great, stable platform. Every time I hold an event like this, I appreciate just how well it works. Don't miss our Alternative Education Film Festival. You know an idea is really good when it hasn't caught on yet. I don't think we're getting a lot of traction with this, but it's a really good idea. We have 7 films this month that are available online. We're doing directors' interviews. They're all about alternative and non-traditional education. We've had Herman Doyne's The Forbidden Education. We've had Kevin Solling's War on Kids. There's much more fun to come. Do go to altedfilmfest.com. We're having fun. Okay, so those of you who are in the live audience, you can click to the left of the map on the star icon. Click on it twice, then click on the map. And Piyush, we're so glad that you're coming in from India. Early morning for you. You make us international. Maisie's in Israel. Maisie, the amazing volunteer. Do put a note in the chat, letting us know something about where you are and what you're doing. And I'm going to move us forward to give Blake as much time as he needs. Blake, I'm here for the duration, so let me know if I can help you with anything or Q&A, and I'll let you go.
Sounds good. Thank you, Steve. All right, let's see if this slide works. Here we go. Hold your breath. Oh my gosh, it works. All right, everyone. Hi, my name is Blake Boles. Thank you for joining me and Steve and this Homeschool Plus conference. This is called Hogwarts for Unschoolers. And Hogwarts for Unschoolers is a code name for a project I've been working on for about a year now, seriously, but really for 10 years. And this is one of my longest held goals, as you can see on the slide, is to start a school, which I'm not using the school in a strict sense. I'm using it in a loose sense as a long-term sort of structured learning program. And this is something I've wanted to do for about a decade, ever since I got started. And so I'll tell you briefly how I got started, and then I'll move into my thoughts and research on building some sort of place, some sort of school program for self-directed young adults. So my story starts here in California. I'm in San Francisco right now. I grew up in Southern California, though, and I went to regular California public schools. I did well in school. I was sort of interested in math and science. So I went straight to college, like a good student does, to study astronomy and physics, because that seemed like the most interesting thing to do. The stars are interesting. I still think they're interesting. But that interest only took me as far as the start of my 3rd year of college, at which point 2 things happened. The first one was I hit this intellectual wall where it became suddenly very difficult to move past this. And this wall was called quantum physics. And if you've ever taken or read about quantum physics, it is no longer physics that you can visualize anymore. It is all math. And all the cool stuff about stars and astronomy, and that all got reduced to math equations. And I realized, oh man, I don't love math enough, and I'm not really that good enough at math to be a really good research scientist. And so I was having these thoughts about, oh, what should I do? Maybe I should enable my backup plan to be a high school science teacher. Maybe I should drop out of college and go teach snowboarding, which always was in the back of my head. And so I was going through this mid-college crisis when, luckily, a friend handed me a book by the author John Taylor Gatto, who was a New York City public school teacher for 30 years. He did a lot of innovative stuff with his kids in the classrooms, including some of the best and the worst classrooms in New York City. And he won Teacher of the Year award multiple times, and then he quit teaching in 1991, and he wrote an op-ed to the Wall Street Journal saying he no longer wanted to make a living hurting kids anymore. So hearing that and reading that really inspired me to take a deeper look at my backup plan of becoming a high school science teacher. And I went on Amazon.com and I found all the related books. I learned about homeschooling, unschooling, democratic free schools, the radical stuff from the 60s. I just soaked it all up like a sponge. And pretty quickly I decided to change my major. I designed a major to study alternative education full-time and ended up doing a lot of independent study and wrote a really bad senior thesis paper and ended up graduating from college at the end of 2004. And so that was about 10 years ago now. And I got this idea in the midst of my self-directed college studies. And so when I'm saying that this is a long-held goal, I'm serious. I've been thinking about this for 10 years. Let me tell you my very first conception of what a cool alternative school, or Hogwarts for unschoolers, would have looked like, just to show you perhaps how far we've come. My first idea was that I could have a hexagonal-shaped building. So there'd be 6 different pizza pie slices in this building, and each slice would be a different academic theme, like English or history or math or science. And you could you could roam freely between these rooms and study whatever you wanted. Of course, my conception of what you could study or what you could learn or practice was all academic at that point. I was still immersed in, the entirely academic mindset. And I think to demonstrate my naivete, my addition to the school was that it was going to be for skateboarders only. So I'm not going to provide any further commentary on my early Hogwarts for unschoolers dream in my head, the hexagonal skateboarding free choice academic school. That was the early idea. But pretty quickly into my studies, one of the first ideas that I really latched onto was the Sudbury Valley School model. The Sudbury Valley School, for those of you who are not familiar, is a free school. And that doesn't mean free like you don't have to pay any money. It means free like free choice. That started in 1968 in Framingham, Massachusetts, and it's still running to this day. And they've produced an extremely large volume of literature about their school and how it operates. And so just go online and Google Sudbury Valley School or go to sudval.org if you're interested in learning more about them. I highly recommend it. They were sort of my gateway drug into alternative schooling and self-directed learning. Sudbury Valley School is great because they have this kind of charmed story. A group of alternative educators is trying to start something new in the late 60s when there's a lot of little alternative schools popping up and disappearing pretty quickly. But this group of people managed to get their hands on this giant pristine property in New England. I think it's 160 acres of grassy, wooded beautifulness. And then on that is this giant stone mansion. And so they have this incredible property with which to work, and they bring in a group of all-age kids, so we're talking K through 12, and they have a system that is the free school system. They say, we are not going to ask you to do anything here except not be mean to other people or break the rules of the school. Otherwise, you can do whatever you want. If you want to sit on this couch and eat Cheetos all day, and read philosophy or play Minecraft or do nothing at all, just sit there and stare at a wall, you are empowered to do that, young man or young woman. And so reading this was a giant eye-opener, like, oh my gosh, this is a little radical and also pretty cool. And the fact that they had this space, this property, 160 acres with this incredible physical building on it and a barn also, made this model, I think, much more viable. Today, the Sudbury Valley School has, I believe, around 150 enrolled students, K through 12, and it's the same model. You don't have to do anything. If you want an adult, and there's plenty of adults, paid staff members who work at the school, if you want an adult to organize something, like organize a class about algebra or about guitar building or something else, you have to convince the person that you actually want to do this. There's a great story in the Sudbury Valley School literature called And Arithmetic, which is about a group of multi-age kids who go to one of the staff members, one of the founding members of the school, and they say, hey, we want to learn math. And the guy says, really, do you want to learn math? come on, your parents are probably putting you up to this. And they say, no, we really want to learn math. We want to learn all of it, like all the way up through what I think of as pre-algebra, basic math. And so the guy said, oh, really? And he's trying to suss out their motivations. He wanted to make sure they're being self-directed and self-motivated and not externally pressured, which is, again, something great about this model. And so finally, he relented and we said, all right, we're going to do math, but here's the rules. We are going to use this old school like textbook from 1898, and it's a math primer. It's no BS. Like, we're just going to do drill, drill, drill. We're going to get down to the core of this. We're going to go as fast as we can. And they said, yes, we are into this. And long story short, within the course, I believe, of a couple of months, this group of kids from ages maybe 8 to 12 had learned all basic math. All basic math, and that's it. They were done. They learned it all because they were motivated to do it, and they wanted to do the hard work. They wanted to do the drilling. When I read this, I said Sudbury Valley School is doing something right. They are an environment for self-directed learners. The fact that they don't require anything, but they'll provide assistance and structure and instruction when asked for, was really smart. And it's a democratically managed school also, which means every student and staff has the same vote. And so a 5-year-old who comes in and it's her first day at school has the same vote at the democratic school meeting as the founder of the school who's been there for 40 years. And so that doesn't mean that they can vote on anything. They can vote on rules about how the school is run. They can vote in certain staff members. They can't vote to, like, you know, oh, we're only going to eat candy corn today. I don't think that's part of their system. But very cool model. And I was very sold on Sudbury as soon as I read about it. And so that was like my operating model of like a good Hogwarts for unschoolers until I found the Northstar model. Northstar is, it's called Northstar Self-Directed Learning for Teens. And notice that they don't use the word school. At the Sudbury Valley School, it is a private school registered with the state of Massachusetts, and to go to the Sudbury Valley School, you need to attend a certain minimum number of days per week and hours per day. Northstar says, whoa, 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 we are not a school. Think of us like a YMCA, like a club. We are a resource center, and this is a resource center for homeschoolers. Homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. You can register as a homeschooler, and it's relatively easy. Depends on which state you're in. Some states are a little bit more difficult. Here in California, you just sign a piece of paper in October, and it's carte blanche. You can do whatever you want. And so they encourage people, this is also in Massachusetts, Northstar, it's in western Massachusetts. They encourage people to enroll as homeschoolers, and then you can come and attend Northstar for any amount of time that you want. You can sign up for 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days, or 4 days. And you can come for 1 hour a day, or you can come for 9 hours a day. It's your choice. And so they took the Sudbury Valley School free school model, and then they turned it into something that wasn't actually a school. They turned it into more of a club that was a little bit more flexible, but it operated the same way in the sense that if you wanted to have a class organized at Northstar, you could advocate for that, and they would help find a staff member or a college student, because there's a lot of colleges in western Massachusetts, who would come in and volunteer to lead a class. Or if you are a student at Northstar, you can initiate and lead a class on your own. And so again, we have this free school model, even if it's not really a school. What Northstar, I think, is doing a really good job of pioneering is the idea that everyone, if you're going to take this highly self-directed path, that you should really be responsible for your own education, and you should really signify that responsibility by registering yourself as a homeschooler with the state and saying, I am a freelance agent, and one part of my curriculum that I am designing or I'm helping my child design is this resource center that, you know, I go there and they have mentorship for my kid, or they have classes available that my kid is interested in, or drama programs. And so Northstar, by the way, both of these models are still out there, and they're expanding. There are Sudbury model schools. There are Northstar model programs popping up all over North America, and some also internationally. So it's definitely worth your time to Google. Cool. So both of these programs were very interesting to me, and I thought these could be a really cool Hogwarts for unschoolers. And essentially, the principle behind them is that it's a co-working type model. Some of you might be familiar with co-working in the adult sense of a place where, usually in a big city, you'll find a co-working center where freelance people or very small businesses that might just have 2 or 3 people can go and they can rent some office space, and they can be part of this greater community but working on their own project. That's how I see Sudbury and Northstar. That's how I see their functional model. It's a co-working model where you can come in and you are free to do your own thing. No one's forcing you to learn one thing and not learn something else. You can come in, you can do nothing if you want. You're paying for the privilege of being there. Like as an adult, if you go to a co-working center, you're paying for access to the center for a few days a week. And there's some amenities there. They have clean bathrooms and fast Wi-Fi, and somebody will refill the coffee when it's empty. And otherwise, they leave you alone to do your own thing. So this was my first model, co-working. A co-working center for young adults. Yes, that is Hogwarts. Fantastic. Game over. If only it was that simple. Because then I started thinking about summer camp. And I went to a wilderness summer camp in California that really changed my life when I was younger. And then after college, I went to work at a new summer camp called Not Back to School Camp, which is pictured in the slide. And Not Back to School Camp is the preeminent summer camp for teenage unschoolers. And it operates in August and September and a little bit into October every year in Oregon and Vermont, and it's a place where these teenagers go instead of going back to school. And I've worked there every year since 2006. I'll be there very soon to work in 2014 at the Oregon session. And what I saw at Not Back to School Camp was the power of the overnight program. I knew this through my own experience going to summer camp. The fact that you go away to someplace new, away from your family, away from your familiar home environment, and you go to a place where you're mostly surrounded by your peers, but then a trained, caring adult staff who's there to facilitate a certain type of experience. That's an incredibly powerful experience that's very difficult to get with only a day program. And Sudbury and Northstar are both day programs. They're day schools, or Northstar, whatever you want to call it. It's a day center. And so you can have some pretty cool experiences there during the day, but at night you're still going back to your regular home environment. And for many unschoolers, homeschoolers, self-directed learners, that's a really excellent environment to be in, and that works well for them. And for others, you know, when you get to that teenage age range, as we'll talk about just a little bit later, you're ready to break away and try to define yourself, and that's more difficult to do with only a day program. And so Not Back to School Camp, and then my own summer camp, Deer Crossing Camp, really showed me the power of having a place where young people go and they live mostly with their own age cohort and with staff for a period of time. Summer camp was only a week or 2 weeks. It never really went beyond that for me. And so even this program wasn't quite long enough, and this is, as I'll tell you later, this is what pushed my thoughts towards an even longer program than just a 1 or 2 week long camp. So that got added into the mix for Hogwarts now. It's the overnight, the camp aspect. And then I actually discovered this back in 2013. We're not going very chronologically here. Excuse me, 2003, not 2013. I discovered the actual Hogwarts for unschoolers. If you've never heard of the Summerhill School, it is essentially Sudbury Valley School, democratic free model, plus overnight summer camp sort of boarding school model. Smash them together, give it some nice English charm, it's in England, and you get the Summerhill School. This is the actual Hogwarts for unschoolers. It was already started, I think, back in the 1930s, and A.S. Neal was the founder and the headmaster of this school, and he wrote some incredible books. One of them is called Summerhill, and it's worth your time to Google. And so this Hogwarts thing has already been done. Somebody added a camp plus a free school. The issue for me with the Summerhill School was it's in England. It's far away. There was nothing like the Summerhill School in the United States. And so I thought, why don't we have a Summerhill School here? Why don't we have a free school, boarding school? There may have been some little models like this that started up and then went away. Maybe there's some models I don't know and that exist right now. Please email me, yours truly at blakeboles.com, if you know about something like this that exists because I want to know about it. But the problem was this great thing was far, far away, and I wanted there to be more programs like this in the U.S. So, Summerhill, yet another part of the Hogwarts model. Finally, I had to take a close look at the place where I was living in college when I started doing all this research, which was having, I would say, a bigger effect on me than my actual academic experience in college. The place where I was living was a unique place called the Berkeley Student Cooperatives. And this is the largest college cooperative living system in the United States, maybe in the world. And you can go to their website, bsc.coop, and let me tell you about the house that I moved into at age 18. At age 18, I moved into a house called Casa Zimbabwe, which is a 124-person house on the north side of Berkeley's campus. It's a co-ed house. It looks kind of weird. You can see in the slide, it looks like a cross between, I tell people, between a dormitory and a fraternity or a sorority house. And so that means they have long hallways where everyone has their own rooms. There's singles, doubles, and triples. But there's also large common areas and a large commercial kitchen attached to the common areas that lets the students run the place. And that's what the magic of the co-op is, as we like to say, we own it, we run it. This is not a dorm that's administrated by the university. This is a place where there's no cooks that are hired to prepare food. There are no people who come in and clean the bathrooms. There are no hired managers or RAs for the co-op. The students do everything themselves. And part of this is for a practical reason. It keeps the costs down. If you don't have to pay a bunch of people to do stuff like cooking and cleaning, then you can pay less money as a student, which is very important to many students. But more so, it was a chance for students, for we college students, to get the first experience in our lives of managing our own household, of dealing with the fact that we are filthy, filthy people. At least the people in Casa Zimbabwe. It was kind of a filthy place to live. But there's a magic in knowing that this filth is my filth. Nobody else created this. I created this, and I'm the only one responsible for getting rid of this filth. And there wasn't like trash strewn everywhere. Don't let me paint a bad picture. You can go and tour the co-ops yourself. If you ever go to Berkeley, California, go find the co-ops and ask for a tour. They're free. So living in the co-ops was a pretty magical experience for me, coming from living in the suburbs, having a lot of stuff taken care of for me. I got to go to the co-ops, and the very first thing that happened was somebody said, hey, you owe 5 hours per week to the house, because that's your work shift. That's how the co-ops works. We are cooperating together. It's like a little commune. And so they said, what kind of work shift do you want? And I said, cooking? Yeah, cooking sounds good. And so I became a member of the Thursday night cooking shift. We would make dinner for the entire house. About 90 people from the house showed up for dinner on any given night. And so all of a sudden I was thrust into this position of being part of a team that needs to create a edible, non-burnt, meal for 90 people that is composed of meat eaters, vegetarians, and vegans. I didn't even know what a vegan was before I went to the student co-ops. And all of a sudden I'm like, you don't eat what? And I need to prepare something for you? So I was thrust into this situation where I'm flipping over, foot-high piles of tofu and veggies and preparing this incredible amount of rice for a stir-fry dinner, and I'm like, nobody's teaching me how to cook here, but I'm somehow learning it anyways. Because I'm learning it from the other students who have been in Casa Zimbabwe for a few semesters already. They're saying, here's how you cook rice for 90, and they give me the pro tips. And I'm going online to figure out how to, make blackened chicken, because I became a vegetarian in college, and all of a sudden I'm cooking meat for people and I'm a vegetarian. It's a very dangerous situation. I don't recommend that you do what I did. But being thrust into this position of responsibility of taking care of the place where I was living, providing for my fellow community members through cooking and other work shifts, was an incredibly empowering experience. And it made me realize that many boarding schools, or schools in general, take care of a lot of stuff for their kids. And for younger kids, that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't throw a bunch of 6-year-olds into a cooperative house and say, yeah, go cook for each other. No, we have to talk, developmentally appropriate here. But for teenagers in boarding schools, it's a lot like being in the dorms in college. You just get a lot of stuff taken care of for you. And in one way, that's nice, but in another way, that doesn't give you the opportunity to develop in the way that you only can when you are responsible for your community, for your lifestyle, for your living area, for your filth. And so something was there in the student co-ops, some principle for me for Hogwarts. And so things started getting complicated. And suddenly my model wasn't just co-working like we had before with Northstar in the Sudbury Valley, but it became this model of co-working plus living together overnight in the sort of camp or co-op type model. Okay, so this is Hogwarts now. Summer camp plus co-working. We're living together, we're working together overnight, we're contributing to our area, but we're still doing our own thing. All right, now let's make it even more complicated. Because someone I got really into in college was Maria Montessori. And a lot of you probably know Montessori from her preschools, which are everywhere, and maybe her elementary schools, which are, there are a few here and there. And just as a disclaimer, Montessori is not a trademarked or protected name. And so anyone can start a Montessori school, and they won't necessarily do the stuff that Maria Montessori, the Italian physician who lived in the first half of the 1900s, really talked about in her writing. And so take Montessori stuff with a grain of salt. You might have seen some Montessori going on that wasn't actually like the real Montessori. So interesting thing about Montessori is that she created her own system of developmental stages for ages 0 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, and 16 to 20. And I think probably 20 to 24 also. And she worked through them throughout her life. She started with the youngest, and she really developed a solid framework through writing. You can find a lot of books about the preschool ages. And then she developed another pretty solid framework for the elementary school ages. And then when she got to the middle school framework and the high school framework, those years, she passed away. And so all we have from Maria Montessori for the teenage years are some unfinished manuscripts. But within those manuscripts there's still some really interesting material. And I'm not a Montessori scholar, but in a nutshell, she said for younger kids, let's say elementary school age kids, they are still in the stage of being okay and willing to take in information from adult authority figures. I am going to absorb your knowledge about the world, adults, because you are the knowledgeable people, and I need to know stuff about this world because I'm really curious about how the world works. And I think you can make a very loose argument as to why elementary schools might work better for kids than middle schools and high schools do on the broad scale. Then she said around age 12, and when she said 12, I think she means like plus or minus a year or two. Around age 12, then we move into a very different developmental stage. And she said that's when all of a sudden we are no longer focused on the adult authority figures who we want to learn everything from. We are now more focused on our peer groups and learning socially. And we are less focused on getting like the raw facts about how the world works. So I interpret that as we're a little bit less interested in academics in this new stage. And we are more interested in how people work and why people do what they do. Again, it's a heavy social aspect. I mean, we don't need a developmental stage theory to tell us that teenagers are more interested in social and peer learning than they are in listening to lectures from adults. That's just patently obvious to anyone who's ever spent time around teenagers. But Montessori made this very clear distinction between these two age ranges when really what we do in regular school is just act like we have the exact same model for the entire K through 12 age range. And we just kind of slowly ramp it up every year. It's the lecture and, stay seated in the classroom model. And that's if you take it from the Montessori perspective, that's crazy. That's a crazy thing to do for the middle school and early high school years. And what she recommended in her unfinished manuscripts was go send teenagers to go live on a working farm or like an actual bed and breakfast where they have some actual real-world responsibilities, and they get to learn by doing hands-on and by doing stuff hands-on in a group of peers that is facing a similar challenge. And so if you go and find some Montessori middle schools that exist out there, one of them featured in the photo here on the slide is the Arthur Morgan School, which is up in western North Carolina. It's a school that I visited. They focus on academics only a little bit, and they use very broad kind of thematic interdisciplinary academics. They don't dig down deep into like the really hardcore academics like you find in most regular middle schools or high schools. Instead, they do a little bit of academics, but then they focus a lot more on living and working together. And so they are on a working farm where the kids have actual responsibilities. The kids are in the kitchen helping prepare the meals and cleaning up after the meals, co-op style. They go on long road trips and backpacking trips. I believe they have a standard like 20-day, maybe more, backpacking trip. And this is 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And the students don't live, it's a boarding school, in case you haven't figured that out. The students don't all live together in some giant, I'm not even sure what that would look like, in some giant dorm. They have small houses with units, I believe, of 4 to 6 students plus 1 to 2 house parents. And the house parents are also the teachers. And so they have these little like kind of mini surrogate families that are spread out around their campus. And it's a relatively small group of people in total. I believe there's no more than roughly 40 students. Hopefully somebody can fact check this stuff for me, Arthur Morgan School. And so that is their layout. It's a relatively small school. People are living in these little house parent houses, and they have actual responsibilities, and they're producing stuff like on a farm, and they're cooking for each other. They're doing a little bit of academics, but it's way less than you'd find in a regular school. And this is all influenced by Montessori and a few other people. And so when I found out about the Arthur Morgan School and other related Montessori-type schools for teenagers, I thought, man, they are really onto something too. This is pretty close to a solid Hogwarts for unschoolers. And a lot of the students in those schools are very self-directed. And we can argue, is it nature or nurture? Did they come in self-directed, or did the school make them more self-directed? But that's a bigger question than we have time for here. Okay, so things are getting even more complicated. The Hogwarts model is now summer camp plus co-working plus Montessori. Okay, just to add one more element, travel. In 2008, I started my company Unschool Adventures, and I started with a 6-week trip around Argentina for 9 teenage unschoolers. I did this because I was working at Not Back to School Camp, and I saw a lot of teenagers having a really good time at this summer camp, but then it was only for a week or for 2 weeks, and they're coming from all across the country, from this very dispersed network across North America, to come together and be with people they really like for this brief period of time. And when they would leave, they would be very sad, and they would say, why don't we have more opportunities like this to meet up and bond and have some fun and talk to each other and go on some adventures? And so I sort of, worked that through the meat grinder up here and realized that I wanted to continue traveling the world for my own personal reasons and didn't want to pay for it because travel is kind of expensive. And so I said, what if I could be a trip leader for groups of teenage unschoolers who want to go out and continue exploring the world in this tight-knit group for like a long period of time, more than just the typical 1 or 2 week long trip. And so I offered, along with a friend from Not Back to School Camp, who was my other staff member, we offered a 6-week trip to Argentina. We did 2 weeks of living in a rented apartment in Buenos Aires and taking tango lessons from a really awesome Argentine tango instructor. We did 2 weeks of living with homestay parents in another part of Argentina and taking Spanish school classes every day, 5 days a week. And then the final 2 weeks were student design travel, where I gave them a budget and they got to decide what to do with that period of 2 weeks in Argentina. We ended up going to a Hare Krishna farm where we volunteered, and that was very interesting. And we had some other interesting experiences. So I started running these Unschool Adventures trips, and it was kind of like going back to summer camp for the first time. I realized, oh my gosh, travel is this natural learning vehicle where you can take the same kid who, let's say in high school, is just going and doing the same repetitious thing every day. They're going to the same school, and you can take them out of that environment for just a brief period of time and have them travel, and all of a sudden they are much more interested in learning again. They're much more alive. There's a natural tendency to want to learn while you are traveling. Part of it is because you have to. If you are in Argentina and you are walking around Buenos Aires and you want to go buy a soda and you speak like 4 words of Spanish and you go into the little tienda and they say, hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Qué necesita? You're like, soda, por favor, and you just pick up the language. And so there's reasons that you have to learn when you're traveling, but it also gives you a really valid excuse to learn about the places where you are going, about preparing for the challenges ahead. And so travel, it made me realize that that has to be part of some sort of Hogwarts for unschoolers. I think you can have a really excellent school or boarding school or alternative school. You can have a Northstar. You can have a Sudbury Valley school. You can have a Summerhill. But if that is your entire life for 9 months out of the year and you're not going away from that very predictable environment, then even that really great place, you can come to appreciate it less. And so travel and seeing new places in some capacity. This doesn't mean you need to be traveling internationally, but just getting away from your familiar environment, I think, needs to be some important part of any good Hogwarts for unschoolers. And this was only reinforced as, in recent years, gap years, the idea of taking a year off in between high school and college, has kind of thrust itself back into the mainstream media. And part of this is in response to the increasing cost of going to college. And people are saying, well, if I'm going to be dumping all this money into going to college, I better be pretty darn sure about what I want to study there and how I want to spend my time there. And so they're saying it's making more sense for me to take a year off before I go into more formal education to figure out what I'm really interested in, to get some of that travel bug out of me. And I'm totally behind the gap year idea, and there's some really excellent gap year programs out there that what's so great about these programs is that they're not regulated by some formal body. They're not really accredited, and so when you sell a gap year program to somebody, you have to make it something that they really want to do. And curiously, a lot of what ends up happening in gap year programs is self-directed learning. There's a lot of stuff that if you look at the gap year program and what they're advertising, you're like, oh, that's what unschoolers do on a sort of day-to-day basis. They say, well, we're going to have you do some reading and maybe go do some traveling and then figure out what you're interested in and try an internship. You're like, yes, this is obvious from a self-directed learning perspective. But they integrate travel in a very big way. And so gap years, that entire idea of taking a focused period of time to figure out who you are, what you're doing, where you want to go next, that got thrown into the mix too. Okay, so we're getting totally messy right now. This is it. This is my current Hogwarts for unschoolers vision. You take 1 dose summer camp. You take 1 dose co-working center. Throw in some Montessori, stir well, preheat to 350, and then put it all in a glass container and with a gap year on top and bake for 45 minutes. You guys following me? Yeah? Okay. Those of you who have worked with me before know my tendency to go off on weird tangential analogies that, yeah. We're just going to go to the next slide now. All right. Here we go. So here's where I am right now. Help me, Harry Potter. I need something. I need something to make this Hogwarts for unschoolers make sense. This is the situation I found myself in last year when I had all these ideas stewing in my brain. And then by another stroke of luck, kind of like the stroke of luck that I had when somebody handed me a John Taylor Gatto book. By another stroke of luck, last year in 2013, I got contacted by a family in California who offered to collaborate with me on this project because I had told people that I wanted to start a school, a sort of Hogwarts for unschoolers. But the big important aspect for me was having a property to do it on. Like I told you before, having a day school was not my big vision. It was having some sort of place where you can do overnight programs. And for overnight programs, you need a property. You need a place to do it. So I got in touch with this family who said, we want to work with you. We are looking to invest in a property, and we would like you to use this property to run and build a Hogwarts for unschoolers like you've been talking about. So I went like this. I said, yes, let me think about that for a second. Sold. All right, to the highest and only bidder. So this really forced me to think about my priorities and forced me to go through all of this literature and all this research that I've done, that I just shared with you, which was about a 10-year journey, and figure out what goes into a Hogwarts for unschoolers. What goes into this boarding school, this program? What is it actually going to look like? Before I go into that, I need to give a shout out to the creators of the image you see here on the slide, which is my face photoshopped onto a Harry Potter and Hogwarts graphic. J.K. Rowling, please don't sue me. I didn't create it because Blake Club created it. If you go to facebook.com/Blake Club, you will find a weird set of photos of my face photoshopped on top of it. And I don't know who does this. I'm pretty sure it's a group of my former students from summer camp and trips and writing retreats. So that's all I'll say about Blake Club. Thank you, Blake Club. So what I came up with after reflection was this one question. What do teenage self-directed learners want, and what do they need? I figured if I could answer this question, then the answer, what should go into a Hogwarts for unschoolers, is going to become apparent. And just to put this on the table, most of my focus is on teenagers for this program, because a boarding school type program is just much more difficult to do with younger kids. And so most of my focus has been on what we call the middle school and high school age ranges. And what I came up with was 8 features of a Hogwarts, and that's what I'm going to share with you now in our brief time remaining. The first feature of a good Hogwarts for unschoolers, I think, is this. It should be teens plus adults plus solitude. This is the boarding school model. And like I told you before, I feel like day schools are fundamentally limited in their ability to really transform somebody because you're always going back to the familiar home environment at night. This is the power of a summer camp. This is the power of a boarding school. This is the power of a gap year or the power of a student co-op system. You are going and you are living with a group of other people who are facing similar challenges to you for an extended period of time. And so for me, a Hogwarts should be just like the Hogwarts in the Harry Potter world. It should be a boarding school. The teens should take ownership for this property. This should not be some posh Club Med where everything is provided for you. Number one, because that gets really expensive. And if it's expensive, then we're limiting the number of people who can attend this program. And number two, because teenagers are really happy to help out with building stuff. And this is something I've seen over and over again. If we just give teenagers a little bit of a chance to have some responsibility and actually contribute to their environment, then most often they will do it. And so just like with the student co-ops where I lived, teenagers can do cooking, they can do cleaning, they can build stuff, they can repair stuff, they can even organize, they can be part of the group that creates workshops. They can lead and they can vote. And again, as with the disclaimer about the Sudbury Valley School, I'm not saying pure democracy where we can vote on everything and, a group of 30 teenagers votes to tar and feather Blake and boot him off the island. No, I will make sure that doesn't happen. But it means that there is some semblance of a democracy where the people who are taking ownership for their community, who are putting work into their community, also have a semblance of control over the community that is greater than just like a student, a student government at a high school, for example. That's kind of like the banana republic. And what we want to have is something where it's a balance between just the banana republic and then the total, democracy where they're voting Blake off the island. Moving along quickly. This is an obvious one, I think, for many of you guys out there, self-directed studies. So the Hogwarts should not have a very strict curriculum. I think that there is some power in having a common curriculum in a program like this, something that you are signing up for, and you know that you're going to get into this, and you're going to be required to do some things. So, for example, at the summer camps where I've worked and the Unschool Adventures trips that I've run, the required aspect is show up for the all-group meetings where everyone has a chance to share concerns about the community or make announcements, and be there for the meals. these are our common bonding times, and we want you to do that stuff at a minimum. But beyond that, if you want to go to a workshop or not, that's your choice. And so it should be self-directed to the extent that we are allowing exploration and discovery to really work their magic. And we're not forcing a very strict curriculum on everyone. Again, if you're already a fan of democratic free schools, of unschooling, of homeschooling, this is a no-brainer for you. I just wanted to make sure that we got it in the slides. Process before content. Remember when we were talking about the Montessori-inspired Arthur Morgan School and how they have a little bit of academics and they have a little bit of stuff that is, we are going to ask you to please do this when you're here. Much more of the work at that school and at summer camps and programs I've been involved in is about focusing on how we are working together, not what we are working together on. And so this means, here's the specific example that's in my mind. If you're in an all-group meeting and one person, say, teenager raises her hand and says, well, this is my idea about what we should do about this issue, and another teenager raises her hand and says, that's a really dumb idea. You have a choice at that moment, which is, do you continue with the content of the meeting, or do you focus on the process? Do you stop and say, like, okay, our process is not working right now because there was a sign of disrespect that happened. To be willing to put content on hold in order to focus on process at any moment, I think is the power of a potential Hogwarts for unschoolers. And it works really well with the place where teenagers are. They're focused on each other and group cohesion and dynamics and how we work with each other. And to let something like somebody disrespecting somebody else just slip by, and I remember from my own experience in high school, there was a lot of that happened. Even within a classroom with a very, I'd say, watchful teacher, that teacher cannot address all of the little slips that happened and the fighting and the disrespect and the quarreling. To be able to focus on that group process at any moment, I think, is something that needs to happen in a Hogwarts, or at least one that I want to be involved in. That means clear communication, it means working together as a team, and it means meta-learning. Meta-learning is the process of learning how to learn. So we'll come back to that in just a second. The next feature, active mentorship. Northstar, self-directed learning for teens, one of the things that they require for every single teenager who comes there is that they meet with a staff mentor. And they meet regularly. I believe it's once every month, a minimum. And they have a meeting when they come in and a meeting when they leave also from the program. And so this is something that is just, again, if you're already familiar with the self-directed learning world, this is something that you know is important. And it's something that in regular schools, including regular boarding schools, can easily get missed. And even, I think, within a free school environment, when I saw some like Sudbury model startup free schools that had very constrained resources and the staff working there were very busy, active mentorship was something that got streamed to the wayside. And so this is something that needs to be a top priority, just like focusing on process. We need to make sure that there's active relationships between the adults and the campers, the students, whatever name we're going to use for them, in a Hogwarts for unschoolers. And speaking of the adults should not be categorically different people from the students in a Hogwarts. They should be actively modeling everything that they're asking the students to do. To me, this is just a good principle of business, right? If you're the boss, don't ask your employees to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself. And so this means if we are talking about meta-learning, if we were talking about learning how to learn, which is something that I would like to personally instruct as a series of workshops in any sort of Hogwarts I get involved with, this means I'm not just teaching people how to do something and not doing it myself. If we were talking about how to email and get a response from somebody who you really admire and how to craft a really solid email, I'm going to do that too also. And if I don't do that, if I don't open myself up to a little bit of possibility of failure and showing them my messy process, my own process, then I don't build as much rapport. And so that's why I think you easily get into these weird arbitrary hierarchies in high schools and boarding schools because the teachers are doing one thing and they're asking the students to do stuff that they themselves are not doing. So that's the BS part. adults and teens should largely be working on the same projects. And when teens see adults modeling something, they're so much more likely to actually do that thing themselves. Next feature, a lot of people are concerned with digital detox nowadays, and that means less screen time. I just want to briefly say that for myself, the only way that I've ever managed to pull myself away in any serious fashion from this, my little blinking email and phone and text message indicator, is by doing something more interesting than staring at that screen. And so just arbitrarily, if I gave myself a restriction, like I can only do 2 hours of screen time every day, or only 30 minutes of Facebook, Blake, I've tried. It doesn't work. Instead, I need to be doing something more awesome than Facebook. And that means I want to be going for a hike or for a backpacking trip. I want to go and be connecting with somebody really interested in my local area, going to a fascinating workshop, going to work at Not Back to School camp. When I work there, I don't think about getting on Facebook every 30 minutes. And so this is just to say, I don't think that electronics should be restricted in the Hogwarts for Unschoolers. These are wonderful, incredible devices, and the fact that we can use them to learn almost anything really quickly, or at least start learning about something with Google, we need to keep that feature. But the way to get off of our little glowing rectangles is to have more interesting stuff going on, and that's what a Hogwarts for Unschoolers should focus on doing, is creating activities and workshops and group experiences that are better than little glowing screens. Finally, travel. I already told you travel should be a big part, and so any Hogwarts for Unschoolers I don't think should be focused entirely on the campus and the program itself. There should be opportunities to go other places to practice what you've learned at this Hogwarts, or just to go into nature to get that digital detox, for example. And this will give us more context for our learning. Again, I'm preaching to the choir here. All right, to wrap up, these are the 8 principles that I have come to believe are important for any Hogwarts for Unschoolers. I don't take ownership of these. I want anyone out there to start their own Hogwarts for Unschoolers, and please email me. I will do my best to help you start your own Hogwarts. Or if you want to get interested in mine, then send me an email and say, hey, Blake, I'm really interested in your Hogwarts, and maybe we can work
this is Steve.
somehow.
This is like a 4-minute warning. I know you've got, it looks like you're closing in. I just want you to know you're doing great.
I'm closing. We are so close. We'll be done before 2. All right, so my vision. As of right now, 2014, I'm looking at finding a property in the California Sierra foothills. And so that's that area in California west of the mountains and east of the valley. It's a really nice area, and it's a very nice temperature for most of the year, outside of the summer. It's really hot in the summer. And so I want to run programs that happen in the spring and the fall and the winter, during the school year, the school months. And that's what will make this a Hogwarts for Unschoolers. This won't just be something that happens in the summer, like so many other excellent programs. This will be something that, if you want to do this, you're not going to be able to go to school concurrently. And so I think that will make it interesting. And it will limit our possible population, but I think it will make it most interesting. Next, I want to see this Hogwarts, be largely camping focused. I think in the same way that co-ops are we own it, we run it, when you have a very low infrastructure Hogwarts where people are staying in tents, or they're staying in yurts, or they're staying in very rustic accommodations, first of all, there's not much stuff to break, and second of all, you can actually let teenagers take ownership of their own personal spaces. If you just live in your tent, then nobody cares that you've created a filthy mess. You can live in your squalor. Good for you, teenager. I'm also very interested in integrating tiny houses, which are little 120 square foot, plus or minus, residences on wheels, which makes it much better for dealing with building codes and zoning. But imagine being a teenager coming to Hogwarts and saying, welcome to Hogwarts. Here's your tent. If you would like to live in a tiny house, you may build it. We are having a building instruction workshop for the next 3 weeks. If you're interested in doing this, show up. If not, enjoy your tent. It could happen. Meta-learning workshops. This is my personal interest. I want to teach workshops about learning how to learn. I'm working on developing a set of those workshops right now. I want to make them interactive and perfect for a group of 10 to 20 teenagers. And I want to bring in other staff members that teach other stuff also. I don't see this as being like Blake's commune or cult. Just putting that out there right now. That would be, even though the Blake Club looks very culty, okay? Field trips. I want to be close to Yosemite National Park. That's what the slide is right there. And have nature-based field trips. Backpacking trips are perfect for orientations. Go to San Francisco. Go to Los Angeles. Go and try to meet somebody in San Francisco. That would be an excellent field trip. Don't just be in the campus the whole time. And finally, a few other things. Some guest speakers, no enforced bedtimes, mentorship, a lot of mentorship, dance parties, rapid learning challenges like who can teach themselves calculus the fastest. Might work, might not. We'll try a lot of little experiments at this Hogwarts. And sharing work online. I'd love for Hogwarts to be a place where we do a lot of quality work in person, face-to-face, but then we create artifacts, digital artifacts that we put out there like videos, blog posts, photographs, etc., that make it so that we are not just doing this for ourselves, but we are sharing our experience and our failures and our victories with the greater world. That is Hogwarts for Unschoolers. If you are, oh, I forgot, there's another Blake Club photo. If this all works out, maybe I can become this wizened old dude who says, "You're an unschooler, Harry." Moving along, if you want to follow my journey about the Hogwarts for Unschoolers, please join my author mailing list, blakeboles.com/list, or just stalk me on Facebook or Twitter, or find me and send me an email. I'm yours truly at blakeboles.com. That's Hogwarts for Unschoolers. I think I don't have any time for questions. I'm so sorry. I would love to take your questions via email. And that's it. Thanks for listening. Adios. I'm just going to sit here awkwardly until Steve or another moderator says something. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us, Blake. Awesome talk. And we're all coming to Hogwarts as soon as humanly possible.
Glad to hear it.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining. There's 2 more talks left for the rest of the day today, and we hope to see you tomorrow morning, Friday morning, if you're in Eastern Standard Time.